Good afternoon, class, or good morning. So we're going to go to the problem for this week on the working capital and financing decision. Wanted to make sure that we have a quick review, right? A quick review of the concepts. Now, we need to finance our assets, temporary and current. And then we have two options, right? We can actually finance it using short term. We can finance it using long-term financing. A short-term financing would mean that the interest rate will be lower compared to the long-term, which actually is a higher interest rate. However, what happens now is that liquidity or cash position-wise, if you have a short-term debt, your liquidity will be lower. Why? You need to pay it earlier compared to a long-term debt. Although the interest expense or interest rate is higher, you can actually pay it later. So liquidity is higher for our financial position. We are going to go through the problem right now on the left side. I know we have the solution on the bottom for our sample problem, but wanted to make sure that you are not framed wherein the challenge is that sometimes the solution is there, or the framework or the structure for the solution is there for any problem. So we are not able to think critically, right? So normally, as we wanted to give you an alternative basis as you go through the exercise, right? So let's go through the exercise, and then we'll answer together. So Atlas Sporting Goods has 840,000 assets. It goes with a if it goes with a low liquidity plan for the assets, it can earn a 15% return. So I'm going to do it here wherein I would say return on assets, ROA, return on assets, just in case I'll say return on assets. Okay. And then that return on assets would actually show a 15%. And what's the categorization of that 15%? If it's actually a low liquidity. Okay, low liquidity because you need to pay basically short term, pay earlier, you have a high return, right? But with a high liquidity, meaning that you have more cash, high liquidity on the plan to do a loan, right, or financing, the return will be 12%, so lower, 12%. Okay, now I'm going to make sure if we do center, Alt HAC, I'm going to make it a bit smaller so we can actually have enough space. So we finished the first two, first two sentences. I'm going to go to the second sentence, right? Or the third sentence. If the firm, Atlas Sporting Goods, goes with a short-term financing, short-term is low liquidity, we know that, right? The financing costs, so this is basically the expense. So I'm going to mark it expense so I know what it is. The expense, the financing cost of 840,000 in assets will be 9%. Okay, 9%. And then with a long-term financing, long-term, I'm going to pay and settle the loan in the future. I have high liquidity, so that's actually a high liquidity. The expense will be at 11%. So I just want to mark it. Let me highlight. Alt HAC, make sure it's centered. I highlight also. Alt HAC, centered again, right? So it's now saying compute the anticipated return on after financing costs. Return after financing costs. So this is actually the financing cost. I was going to say financing costs. Oops. And then Alt HAC, and then I'm going to make it smaller. And then now you can see that the asset does not have much space, right? I could not find it. So I'll adjust the column width. I could not find it here, right? Because it's actually not showing. So the shortcut will be Alt HOI. There you go. And then it automatically adjusts. So Alt HOI and Alt HAC, HAC for centering. So The question now is compute the anticipated return on letter A with the most aggressive. So I'll going to type here most aggressive. And then letter B, most conservative. There is actually an underline. I'll take it out. And then you could not see, I can wrap it on the text, but sometimes it would affect anything that you have on the row. Highlight, and then Alt HOI. Here you go. Alt HOI, and then I'm gonna so control U will be underline, and then I'm gonna make it center. Alt HAC. There you go. And then now, let me make sure I actually move it up below. Okay? I'm going to put here the 840,000 because we know that's actually the amount, right? And then here, I wanted to make sure that we actually have the dollar amount. So how do we do dollar amount? Alt HA, right? Now I will press enter. It would now be on the dollar amount. And then I want to take out the two decimal places. It will be Alt H9, one decimal less. Alt H9, one decimal less again. If you want to add a decimal place, Alt H0. And I want to take it out, Alt H9. Okay. I know it makes the beeping sound, but like that's actually how you do it. I'm using Windows right now. It might be different when you're using a Mac, but I would say most accountants actually use Windows or Excel. I know some of you use Google Sheet, not a problem on your exams or quizzes, but like in practice, we mostly use a lot of Excel because there's Power Queries being made. And then if you graduated from Excel, then we use Power BI to actually connect, right? But data analytics, Excel is a good thing until such time that you go into SQL, right? Or Python, but a bit different. That one I'm trying to learn, but like right now, most of my data analytics are on business intelligence and also Excel. Yeah. Okay. So now the question is, I'm gonna be. So this is actually the liquidity part, right? So I'll just say liquidity. I have an all caps liquidity, and then financing. I'm just gonna mark it, or I just say right of use asset and then expense, just to be sure that we mark it. So I actually have it here as well, and then we mark it. Control B is actually making it bold. Now, it's going to ask me computer finance, the return after financing cost on letter A with the most aggressive asset mix. So I'm going to do the most aggressive. What's the most aggressive? The most aggressive is that I'm going to pay everything on short term because I don't have as much cash by the end of the short term because I'm going to pay it earlier. So 840 is the assets, finance it full in short term. Short term would actually be the higher interest rate, or the lowest liquidity. I mean, lowest liquidity on the return of the assets. But the interest rate multiplying will be your expense here at 5%. I'm gonna do here Alt HBO to make an underline. Sorry, Alt HBO. Now I have an underline, right? And then I don't want to have the dollar sign on expense, so I'm gonna do Alt HK. Alt HK means that it's actually comma, then Alt H9, H9. And then I will do this minus this expense, right? And then Alt B, B. So it would actually have a double line. That's what we learned a shortcut from the last time, right? So here, I'm basically doing it, but don't forget to minus, right? Some of you might do it this way, minus sign, that's fine also, but make sure you actually add it. So you do equal sign, right? Or alt equals. Alt equals, do that. Yeah. So then now the most conservative is on the other side now. The right of use asset, 840 multiplied by 12%. And then I'll do equals minus 840,000 multiplied by the 11%. Alt equals, enter, 8,400. So that's basically answering letter A on the most aggressive and then most conservative. And then the rest will be a mix, right? What are the moderate approaches? So basically, when you think about it, so this one is actually this side, right? And then this one, I'm going to highlight, is actually this side, this answer. If you're going to have a moderate approach, so basically the moderate approach will be, instead of using the formula on the row level, it's going to use one formula here and one formula there, or one formula here and one formula there. I'll show it to you on the other side here. So 50,400 is your net return if you're using the most aggressive approach. 50,400. Sure. Same thing, right? On the most aggressive asset mix. Now, if I go on most conservative asset mix, same thing. I just want to make sure that we understand why we are actually doing that way rather than us filling up the numbers, which is not the goal. We want to make sure that you have critical thinking, right? And then now here, this is actually what I'm telling you, right? In the most aggressive, it's 15% and then 9. But if it's 15% and 11, then that's actually option 1 on a moderate approach. And then option 2 would be, I'm going to use the 12% return and the 9% of financing. If I do that, then that will be this one. So it's going to be in between. Because so we say most aggressive, the highest one, most conservative, the lowest one, and then as it reference to the way that you are doing liquidity, and then the in between is actually two mixes, so basically a range. Uh, and then now the question is, what will be the most acceptable plan, right, of the optimal mix? So the answer is, you may not necessarily select the plan with the highest return. Does not mean it's actually this or the other one with the 55,000, right? 50,400. Because you must also consider the risk inherent in the plan. Of course, some firms are better to take the risk than others, and ultimate concern is the overall valuation of the firm through the judicious consideration of risk return option. Now, risk return is basically risk management. As we discussed on the problem, it depends on what's your outlook of the economy, what's your outlook on your position, and then what are the other projects that you're trying to support with financing. This might be one, or might be everything else. It might be one in Thailand if you're a big conglomerate, right? But what about the one in the Philippines? What about the one in Hawaii? What about the one in Midwest? So your business might be a global conglomerate, then it's being analyzed only on one approach. And then that's where things comes about, like the arbitrage, meaning that we're not going to make it more complicated than it is, but like sometimes you might do a project in Thailand, but maybe you might want to hedge the bet and then loan from Japan because their interest rate is actually lower at one point in time. Now it's getting higher, and then use the funds in Thailand. So there are other ways. If you will be the CFO or the finance strategist of a company, there's a lot of ways to structure a finance strategy or any of the assets that you need to fund. But for now, that's actually the answer to our um, problem right now. Thank you very much, and then we can do another session on another topic on the next video. Thank you.